The moment you decide, I'm going to step on the mat today, your mind decides that it's the perfect time to think about that unresolved task, that unfinished conversation, that unopened email. It may look like you're just inconsistent on the surface, but I believe that it's masking something much, much deeper. What if I told you that your distraction isn't just a sign that you're inconsistent, but rather an ancient, predictable pattern that yogis have mapped out, and more importantly, learned how to interrupt? And really, using these ancient techniques, you can build this consistent, reliable Ashtanga yoga practice that you've been craving all this time. In this video, we're going to look at our instruments, our internal functioning, and how just understanding this will transform the rest of our practice. We're going to look at the exact mechanism of what goes on when we get distracted so that we can catch ourselves before we get distracted and just lose the ball. And finally, I'm going to give you some practical tips and tricks that will help you just stay on the mat for as long as you can and get it done in the morning. I'm Sushmita, but you can call me Sushi, and on this channel, I help you master your mind through yoga poses, through a structured and time-tested tradition of Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, so that you can see real results in your body, mind, and the rest of your life. So put me on full screen, this is going to be short, and let's dive right in. Let's begin by understanding what instruments we've got so that we can learn to better use them. It starts off with just understanding that we work with the physical body to receive this external stimuli from the world through our five senses. This stimulation that comes in through the five senses then gets registered by the manas, or the lower mind. Now, the manas, or the lower mind, is kind of like a TV that isn't tuned to any one channel and is just static. So its only job is to collect as many sense impressions as possible, and it's kind of like a coordinator of motor responses. This is all the function of the lower mind is. Next, we've got the ahankara, or the I-ness. This is what creates a sense of relatedness. So let's say a flower is seen upon the screen of the mind because the eyes, or the visual sense, is receiving a flower. Now, instead of the manas just saying a flower is seen, the ahankara then says, I am seeing a flower. So this attachment of the I, this relatedness that we make with all the objects in the world, is what the role of the ahankara is. So once the sense impression has been received through the five senses, it's been registered in the lower mind, and then you actually associate with it. You say, okay, I'm connecting it to this vast ocean of knowledge that I already have, and I'm making sense of it. The fourth instrument, also known as the buddhi, is what makes us so unique as humans. It gives us the ability to think, to judge, to make rational decisions, unlike plants and animals that live a very patterned life without this ability to make choices. So whenever a sense impression comes into the field of the manas, we can then relate it and we can say, this is what I am seeing, and also make a decision as to whether or not to act upon it. So these three components of the manas, the buddhi, and the ahankara, they all work together to produce our normal waking consciousness. Whenever there is a distraction or you're pulled away from the present moment, there seems to be a temporary disruption of how these instruments work together. According to yoga psychology, beyond these three instruments, beyond this mental complex, lies the Atman, the Brahman, or the Purusha, which is this pure, untouched consciousness. And all these yogic practices are actually oriented towards bringing about the state of consciousness permanently, the state of bliss where you're not so affected by the mind's complex that's in a constant change, that's in a constant flux. When we experience any temporary disruptions in our practice, it's just to be able to know where it's coming from, whether it's coming from the mind, whether it's coming from the chitta or the memory bank that supports these three structures, or it's coming from a temporary lapse in just our buddhi being able to function really well. And we'll see in the later part of this video how that happens and how you can actually prevent it before it's too late. But before that, it's important to understand the exact mechanism of distraction. It starts off with just the manas, or the lower mind, receiving the sensory input. Remember that it's a sensory motor thing. Its only job is to accumulate and collect as much information as possible. It does not know how to evaluate it, what to do with it. Its only job is to collect, consume, 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 consume. Now, as it does this, and if it's doing it well, then your senses, your whole body is taking in a lot of stimulation. So as soon as it receives the sense simulation, it has to respond. Without higher guidance, in the higher guidance, the work of the buddhi is limited to more important tasks, right? So it will respond to some things with either habit or with instinct. Now, we are born with some instinctual reactions because obviously we evolved from animals, and the set patterns that were in animals have also been passed down to us, so that the buddhi doesn't have to be like looking at all the small details and can focus on the high level strategy of the entire organization. But when the manas is left to its own devices, it just botches up everything and is kind of like an unimaginative drone that just does what it does without really understanding why. When we have a strong buddhi, however, when we have a strong intellect, the buddhi then decides whether or not to follow the mind's impulse, whether or not to act on habit and instinct, and gives the mind a kind of direction. So whenever the buddhi is in action, whatever comes before it, it cuts it like a sword and decides whether this is worthwhile to follow or not, and just dismisses it. But what's important is that the buddhi just decides. The mind is still the thing that executes. The mind is kind of like little worker minion that does all the doing, but the manas is also incapable of evaluation, of higher thinking. So it will keep looping in actions and keep doing things unless the intellect is there to observe it, like a parent watching the child. Think of a small child who's just playing with his friends, and he sees an ice cream truck outside, and the desire is triggered that he wants an ice cream now. He runs in and he tells his mummy, "Mummy, I want an ice cream." And so excitedly, he goes up to her and says, "Please give me money, I want to buy this ice cream." And his mummy says, "No, supper's in 5 minutes, you've got to eat, and after you eat, we'll think about the ice cream." Then the mother says no, there's frustration builds, and the child starts bargaining, starts all these little tactics, and then when that doesn't work, becomes like demanding and angry, and the emotion just keeps escalating. And then you notice that the child is suddenly on the floor, kicking and screaming and demanding for the ice cream, and the mother is just firm and says, "Nope, not now, it doesn't matter." And the consequence of all of this is that the child misses the truck because the truck has gone by, the time for dinner has also gone by, and the child has missed his favorite TV show. So this is exactly what happens to us as well during our practice. The sensory mechanism of just noticing an ice cream truck, of noticing the thing that triggers our desire, then creates this insatiable thirst for the ice cream within us. And then no matter what we do, we need to get the ice cream, and we'll kick and scream and do anything we can to just fulfill that desire. And it's so automatic, so like quick, that we can't really do anything about it. And this is how the lower mind operates, without the parent, without the buddhi to guide it, to control it, and to say, now it's time to eat supper, now it's time to work, so you can't really eat the ice cream. And this is exactly what happens to you on the mat. You start off with the best of intentions, you make your asanas, and then suddenly your mind wanders. Your thoughts stray to dinner or any other concerns you're having in the moment, and suddenly your energy is split. While your body is engaged in making the asana itself, your mind is somewhere else. It's in fantasy, it's doing something else. And in this moment, when your energy is split, of course there's going to be a chaotic result, because you're going to poorly execute your posture. It's not going to be as strong and as concentrated, and you're wasting mental energy doing something in your mind when you can't fully execute it or do anything about it. It's kind of like when a switchboard operator goes on a coffee break and suddenly there's a kid that's just jamming all the keys and doing random things to produce some sense of it and try to control the situation. But it doesn't work like that. The lower mind will always prioritize the base desires. So when it's hungry or when it needs something really basic, like it's too cold, then of course your whole system will look at it as a priority if your intellect, if your buddhi is asleep. So when there's no higher level of functioning, then the mind automatically follows its impulses, follows its desires, its likes and dislikes, and you'll end up not practicing at all. So just remember every time you step on the mat to keep the buddhi alert and awake. And to the extent that the buddhi is weak or underdeveloped, you're susceptible to the mind's tendencies, to the mind's impulses. So when you're on the mat, stay awake, allow the buddhi to be in control, and let the body and the mind just follow. So it seems like cultivating the buddhi, strengthening it, making it more powerful and fortifying it to stay awake and alert during the practice is the only way. But how can we practically do this? There are two main ways of responding as we practice to a thought that comes in. We can either suppress it, which means that sometimes this desire will get stronger, or we can express it. We can abandon our practice and do whatever the mind is asking us to do in that moment. But what if there's a third option? Instead of suppressing it or expressing it, what if the intellect acknowledges it and then gently dismisses it so that it doesn't develop this strong liking, this strong enough desire to prompt action? This is a skill that develops over time, so don't expect yourself to just do it as you begin your yoga practice. But in the context of the asana, it looks like just staying in a shape for as long as you can, listening to the sound of the breath, and without allowing the mind to slip, and when it does, and it will, then gently using the intellect to bring it back to the present moment, acknowledging the desire and trying to stay as thought-free as possible for as long as possible while remaining in the shape. If you practice this way, it'll completely transform your whole practice, and I'm going to give you some practical tips on how you can do this. The first step is to create a conducive environment. So find a place that's quiet and free of distractions so that your mind isn't constantly processing more in your environment. Whenever you cut off or limit the sensory input for your lower mind to process, you can then give some more space for it to really work inside and work with the body and all of the shapes. Next, we're going to practice the Trishtana method, which is using the eyes, working with the postures and the breath and the bandhas, or this energetic aspects. When we work with the Trishtana method, we then withdraw the senses inwards and only focus on the shapes, the energetic effects of the shapes, and where the eyes are going. Now finally, we're going to observe and acknowledge when a thought comes up. So as we're observing this internal landscape of the mind, there will be some strong desire that pulls us away from the mat. Now, after your practice, I want you to actually stop and journal and check what are the top desires that are constantly coming to pull me away, to derail me from my practice. These are the currents that are operating in your life at the moment that are pulling you away from your practice, your work, whatever it is that you want to accomplish. So really notice them and acknowledge them. It is the role of the buddhi to do this. So we acknowledge it, we give it a little bit of brief airtime, and then we gently return the attention back to the present moment, back to the present task, and eventually, slowly, this muscle will start to get trained, and you'll notice how it ripples out into the rest of your life. Understanding our inner workings of the mind is the key to maintaining focus during our yoga practice. We covered a lot of ground today, from learning about our internal instruments, how they work together, learning how to use the buddhi, or this intellect, to control and direct the lower mind, and finally, some practical tips and tricks on how we can create a conducive environment and follow this simple step-by-step process of acknowledging and then gently guiding the mind back to the present moment to stay focused during the practice. If you found value in today's insights, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, comment, and share with a few friends, because we're trying to grow this community. In my next video, I'm going to contrast yoga and fitness, so make sure you hit the notifications bell so you don't miss that one. Until next time, just remember, it's not so much about perfecting the poses, it's much more about understanding yourself, your mind, and working with it instead of against it. Until next time, namaste, and I'll see you.